average Roman consumed 25 grams of salt per day. The USA Olympic weightlifting team also just got a salt-based electrolyte sponsor. Tom Brady even says he drinks a salt-based electrolyte instead of Gatorade. Yet our government tells us to not consume more than 2.3 grams of sodium per day. How did we get here? Why were there wars fought over salt? Soldiers used to get paid in salt. Every human being craves sodium. So what's the deal? If I'm an active person, how much sodium should I get throughout the day? Is it going to stop my heart? Is it going to raise my blood pressure so much that I'm just going to die? I will break it all down for you right now. The simple answer is no.
And my answer to your video is also no. Buckle up your seatbelts because today we are going to talk about salt, aka sodium chloride. I see quite an alarming amount of people telling us to increase our sodium intake, or salt intake for that matter. Considering the fact that 1 gram of salt contains 400 milligrams of sodium, we are speaking about a daily average of roughly around 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day. The World Health Organization is telling us to consume around 5 grams, so around 2,000 milligrams per day. But what exactly are the studies showing us? And this is probably why we have so many influencers telling us to consume more salt, while others are telling us to consume less salt. Why are there so many different points of view on salt? If you actually look closely, you can see many health authorities sharing the same results, that we actually should consume around 5 grams of salt per day. Consuming more than 5 grams of salt per day will increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. Are the influencers right, or are actually the health authorities right? When we look at salt intake, we usually see a U-shaped curve, meaning we see higher mortality rates at lower salt intakes and we see higher mortality rates at higher salt intakes. While the average or the median salt consumption shows lower mortality rates for cardiovascular diseases. And these results are perfectly reflected in the following meta-analysis. This meta-analysis compared usual low or excessive sodium intakes. And with low, the researchers in this study actually mean an average intake of roughly a little bit more than 2,600 milligrams of sodium. So that's more than the recommended 2,000 milligrams of the World Health Organization. The usual intake is more than 6,600 milligrams, and the high sodium intake exceeds 12,000 milligrams on average per day. And the results perfectly reflect what I stated earlier. The highest mortality rates in cardiovascular disease were seen in the lowest and the highest sodium intake. And this is not the only meta-analysis that has come to this conclusion. For example, this meta-analysis looked at the dose-response relationship between salt intake and the risk of heart failure. And the results perfectly reflect the same U or J-shaped curve of the other meta-analysis. This is it, right? This means that we should consume more than 2,000 milligrams of salt and that the World Health Organization, for example, is wrong. Well, not so fast. When you analyze research, it's important to understand the topic that you're actually talking about. Did you know that one of the best methods to assess your sodium intake is through your urine? More specifically, a 24-hour urine test. And that is simply explained by the fact that you excrete out more than 19% of your daily sodium intake through your urine. And all the meta-analyses that we just looked at included studies that only underwent one 24-hour urine collection test. Just one and not multiple. And that's a little bit tricky in my humble opinion. And the reason for that being tricky is the fact that, well, if you follow people, for example, for 5 to 10 years and you just test them once for the sodium intake, the error of measurement is really high. Because let's just imagine one day prior before you go and actually underwent the 24-hour urinary sodium collection test, you went to a restaurant and your sodium intake for that day is actually way higher. That will totally screw over the results. because the researcher then actually will put you in the higher sodium intake category. One way to address this problem would be to have multiple 24-hour urinary sodium tests. And that is exactly what the following study did. And they actually did something really amazing. The researchers in this study compared multiple 24-hour urine collection tests against single 24-hour urine collection tests. And they laid out the differences in a graph. The U-shaped curve that you see right here are the single 24-hour urinary test samples. But what exactly happens if you just look at studies that only included multiple 24-hour urinary collection tests? The red line looked at multiple 24-hour urinary collection tests for 1 year and the blue line for 5 years. And you can see a linear dose-response relationship here, meaning the higher the intake of sodium or salt, the higher the mortality rates for cardiovascular disease. And this is so important why you have to listen to health experts. Health experts know what to look for within the data that they are analyzing. And other influencers might just sound like they're actually making sense, but most of these influencers actually lack the knowledge to analyze the data. These results right here perfectly reflects all the other nutritional debates that you see on social media. Because in nutritional research, once you know what you have to look out for and adjust for, there's not much debate going on there. And I know that one of the comments will probably tell me, but well, Luca, do you recommend higher sodium intakes for athletes? Well, yes, but only slightly. This study right here, for example, looked at the effects of sodium intake on health and performance in endurance and ultra-endurance sports athletes. This study looked at people that not only sweat a lot more, but also burn way more calories and thus need more nutrients than people just doing resistance training. And how much sodium do these people actually need? On average, around 300 to 600 milligrams of sodium per hour. So be sure to check out your sodium intake and be safe. What are your thoughts about this topic? Feel free to let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during my next post.